Yeah, yeah, you're first up. Yep. So, in about 10 seconds, I can say good afternoon, but we are going to get started on time. And I just want to thank you all for coming out. Thank you for being here. Um, it's a good day. It's Halloween, which is interesting because this topic of education is something that has been kind of scary for a lot of folks to talk about, especially this issue of equity. So I think it's fitting. And so let me introduce myself. My name is Frank Whitfield. I'm the president and CEO of the Lorain County Urban League, just about 30 miles west of here. And this conversation today is going to be about urban education and moving the focus from equality to equity. And as you can see from the visual we have here, we wanted to kind of find some sort of imagery. I know you've seen a lot of these images whether it's young people trying to look over a fence and things, but the conversation of equality being give every individual the same thing to the shift to giving every individual what they need. And so this image really reflects that sort of thinking. We're going to talk about what that means in terms of education. But before we get started, I do want to thank our host, the City Club, and thank Dan, and also the wait staff here. Let's give the wait staff and Dan and his team here a hand. Doing a great job. And I wanted Dan to come up and give us just a welcome and some remarks about education. He gets a chance to see a lot of conversations in here on education. So I wanted him to, get us kick started here and give us a boost of energy. So please welcome Dan.
Okay. How much time do you want me to take? 5 minutes. Okay. Hi, everybody. It is great to see you. Hello, Merle. How are you? I feel like I know a bunch of you pretty well, and I'm really glad that we're able to host and provide a venue for this important conversation. I want to start out by apologizing in advance if I tear up or anything like that. It's been just like, can we all just acknowledge what a week it's been? It's just I don't know what's going on in our country right now. And yesterday I was, we just did this project to create 3 new murals, all about freedom of speech. This mural over here is called Freedom of Speech and was painted in 1942 by Elmer Brown, who also did a lot of acting and art and set design at Karamu House, African American, trained in that WPA style. And 2 of his murals also hang over at CSU in the ballroom. And some folks, some City Club members and community members challenged us to invite the community to reinterpret the notion of freedom of speech. And yesterday, there are now 3 new murals. There's one at Playhouse Square on the side of the Bonfoy Gallery that you've probably seen. And there's one on the side of the Harvey Rice branch of the Cleveland Public Library that you can see as you drive down Shaker Boulevard. It's most easily visible as you're heading west towards the city. And that one's by Donald Black and replaced the other mural that had been up there, also by Donald Black. And then we put one up at Collinwood High School in partnership with the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. And that one, the one at Playhouse Square is it's very graphic. There's words all over it and words from our creed, the creed of the City Club. The one at the Harvey Rice branch is just an image, a single image of a young African American male with a microphone and a shattered window. If you haven't seen it, you need to see it. It's beautiful. And the one at the school has lots of different people in it. And it has these 3 words, dialogue, diversity, democracy. Dialogue, diversity, and democracy. And yesterday we were invited, Noelle Celeste, my colleague, and I were invited to speak to faculty at a faculty meeting at Collinwood High School to just give them a little context, because schools are these kinds of places where some brand new thing could happen. A mural could go up and the faculty doesn't know anything about it, right? Because schools are complex places, and teachers are busy. They're preparing lesson plans and grading assessments and all of that sort of thing. And so we went over to talk to them a little bit about it. And before we went to talk to them, I've been looking at these murals, really familiar with all the artwork. And this one in particular was one that I'd paid a lot of attention to. It wasn't actually my favorite of the three. But a lot of other people really who were involved in the selection process really loved it, and it's part of the reason why we went with three instead of just a single mural. We found we had three submissions that were so good that we couldn't not do all of them, so we had to raise some more money to do all of them. And we pulled out. If you go out to Collinwood High School and you pull into the parking lot, you see it. If you get off the bus at Collinwood High School, you see it. It's right there. It's on the side of that building over that's sort of the parking deck and all of that. And it's facing this street level lot, this surface lot that they use for orientation for the families at the beginning of the year. So at the beginning of the next school year, when these new families come, they will be greeted underneath this mural, Dialogue, Diversity, Democracy. And I was very familiar with this piece, and I hadn't seen it at scale. And I got out of my car in front of it, and I looked up at it, and I was overwhelmed, because there are so many, there's just so many things coming together. Now, part of it I was overwhelmed because of this horrible week that we've had in the midst of a horrible year or two or three in which our politics has gotten vitriolic, in which bigotry and forces that would stand against equity have gained so much strength. But also, I was reminded that fundamentally the work of schools is the work of democracy. And the successful work of schools is the foundation of a strong democracy. And that was the feeling, the sort of coming together of all of those sentiments was what I was feeling so strongly yesterday. I used to teach high school in California. Many of you know that. Before I taught high school in California, I taught in a county jail in California, and it was the work in the county jail that kind of led me to teaching high school. And I don't know how I don't remember how I articulated what was motivating me at the time. But when I look back, I am certain that it was this drive toward equity, towards providing young people who, through no fault of their own, find themselves challenged, find themselves really facing adverse conditions, finding themselves woefully underprepared for participating in our communities, for participating in democracy. And it's the little things. There's this policy level at which we're having a conversation today. But ultimately, as Merle knows well, it's what happens in that relationship between a teacher and a student that creates the opportunity that we're talking about. I had a student, her name was Kristen Gray, and she, I didn't know this until years later. It's like the only good thing about Facebook is that you wind up getting reconnected with these people from your past, and and on occasion you'll get a note that indicates the kind of impact that you had, which was the impact you always intended to have, but you didn't know that you were having it or not. Teachers especially almost never know what kind of impact they're having. She reached out to me to tell me that I was the reason that she went to college, which was then the reason why she's now working with youth in San Francisco. I taught in a troubled urban school district in the East Bay, just south of Oakland, California, a place called San Lorenzo. And if you know that stretch of California off 880, it's East Llewellyn Boulevard, and it's a small unincorporated place in California with a really struggling school district, 2 high schools, and what it has going for it is great teachers. And I was fortunate to be surrounded by them. I had great colleagues there. And it's the kind of school, too, where students there's no cafeteria, because schools, like, why would you, I don't know. There's no cafeteria, right? But there was a Taco Bell on campus, go figure. And the kids used to get their lunch and often would eat in my classroom. And I would, and this young woman, Kristen Gray, she was a student of mine in my American literature class. And then in her early senior year, she was having lunch in my room, and I said, "Did you get your application in for Cal State Hayward?" And I don't remember this. She told me all about this. So apparently I said that to her, and she said, no, I was just working on it. Well, she didn't have a plan to apply to college. She wasn't planning on going to college. That wasn't part of her thing. But because I treated her in this way that assumed that she was capable, which was the way I'd always treated her, that assumed that this was something that she not only could strive for, but ought to strive for because she would be successful at. She went and applied, and then she got in, and then she went to college, and all of that. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that you never know. The teachers and these teachers who are doing this work, it's so vitally important. And with teachers, you never know what the impact will be. And ultimately, with education, we never know what the impact will be. We are placing a massive bet. Whenever we do this work, we're placing a bet on a better future for all of us. And it is in all of our self-interest that we do this. But it is mostly in the interest of the future and future generations. So this thing that we're doing, striving towards a more equitable, a truly equitable, not just equal, but equitable future in education, is absolutely worth it. And sometimes it feels so hard. But I want to thank all of you for doing the work. This is the work of our grand experiment of a better America. And I thank you for doing it. The City Club is a partner in this work. I hope you feel that in the conversations that we bring here. I hope you all feel always welcome here. One of the challenges, just to go back to the mural for a second, Mark Joseph very pointedly has noted several times that you come in here and it's all about, we talk about equity, we talk about equality, and we talk about dismantling systemic racism, and you look at that mural and you're like, man, that is a lot of white people. Yes, right? Yeah, I know. Just I'll tell you, just so you know, I've had the trouble with it too. I think Elmer Brown painted himself right in the middle of it. And the last document in that whole stream of documents coming out of 10 Commandments is the Emancipation Proclamation. So I think he was being a little subversive, helpfully subversive. But nevertheless, those murals that we commissioned are definitely a response to the lack of diversity represented there. But I do want to say, I hope you all always feel welcome here. This is your city's club. This is your club. This is what we do. There's no topic that has driven us more than education over the years. Although I would say second to that in these last few years has been equity writ large, racial equity. So as you all prepare to take on these big issues, to untangle this Gordian knot, know that we are at your side. And if you have thoughts about conversations that you think ought to happen, we want to help you make them happen here. So thank you very much. It's a privilege to be with you all today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that, Dan. And so, as you can see, when we thought about having this conversation, we thought there was no better place to have this conversation than the City Club, not only because of the hospitality, but just the tradition here, what this conversation represents. And so I just want to acknowledge a few folks, or really I want to acknowledge everyone in the room and kind of put some context to who we have here. So we have some elected officials in the room. We have some school board members in the room. I saw a school board member earlier. We have some newly appointed Academic Distress Commission member in the room. We have some community volunteers, foundation representatives, nonprofit representatives, and of course, Urban League CEOs. So I'm going to ask my Urban League CEOs to stand so I can introduce them to you all. And I'll start over here with Miss Diane Stevens Robinson, of the president and CEO of the Canton Urban League. So I want to recognize her. Marsha Maccabee, president and CEO of the Greater Cleveland Urban League. Tom Conley of the Urban League of Youngstown Warren. And Dr. Sadie Winlock of the Akron Urban League. So to get things started, Marsha's going to come up and share some context for this conversation today, just kind of ground us in where this, what's motivating us from a national standpoint. And then we really want to dig into some conversation amongst the folks here, because I think there's a lot of richness in this room, and I always think the answers are amongst us. So Marsha's going to set some context here, and then I'll come up and facilitate. I pride myself on my facilitation skills, so hopefully I do a good job and we get the most out of everything in here. So thank you, Marsha.
So I'm going to start with a lesson on equity versus equality. So Frank stood at the podium. I'm standing at the podium. We both have the ability to stand at the podium and talk, okay? That's equality. We both have equal access to the podium. But you could see Frank much better than you can see me. And equity input would be something that I think Dan's about to get from me. Right on time. And I love you, my brother. I'm praying for you, okay? Okay, all right. So right on time. Okay, so now I have received an equity input that allows me to perform, okay, at a similar level as my colleagues. So therefore, equity. Okay, so there we go. That's my equity lesson for the day. So I'm really, really, really happy to be here. And thank you to each of you who came to join us today. I have a question for you, and I think there's a real advantage to this soft launch that we're doing today, because we really do have an intimate group here. So I want to ask you a question. How many of you feel that the state of urban education, particularly in our area, in Northeast Ohio, even in our state, is at a very serious juncture? Let me see your hands. Okay, so we got the temperature of the room, Frank. We're all pretty much on the same page there. And here's what I say as I go around doing the work that we're doing. That I believe that if children were dying from a disease at the level that children are dying educationally, every system in this country would come to a screeching halt to find a solution. And so I take seriously, as an Urban League leader, the role that we need to play to begin to help convene the community, because you see, for far too long, this has been an issue that has been pointed to schools and schools only to fix. In urban education today, especially in many of our poor school districts socioeconomically, there are so many issues that impact children's ability to learn that we have to come together as a community to change that game. And so we're here today to have a soft launch of a program called No Ceilings on Success. We're tired of any ceilings on success for our students, and we're going to work on that. We're going to change the game on that, and we're going to talk about how can we do that together as a community. So we've asked some of our best and brightest leaders here to be with us today, so that you can help us to plan what that ought to look like. You can help inform us as to what that needs to look like. Now, as we go forward, just a little bit of context. Frank Whitfield from Lorain County and Tom Conley and I have already been involved for a couple of years now. Tom and I a few years, or Frank and I and Tom joined us recently, where we're working with school districts, the State Board of Education, and other community leaders to start talking about how do we create equity in the implementation of the Every Student Succeeds Act. Now, I think most everybody in this room, from the vantage point at which you serve as a leader, you already know that the difference in the Every Student Succeeds Act, it specifically calls out equity as a key cornerstone for what has to happen in community engagement around ESSA. It also gives more power to the states. No Child Left Behind and the Elementary and Secondary Education Act started as more of a top-down kind of approach. Well, Every Student Succeeds Act creates more intervention at the state level. So you have all that going on. And Frank and I have been working with our state. And let me just take a minute to give a shout out to Paulo Di Maria. He has been very engaged with us on our Wallace team. We've been working for 2 years, he and his team, and we have seen some real movement in terms of working with districts, working with us, and really calling on us to help move the equity lens. And so I want to just, in their absence, they weren't able to be here to join us today, but I just want to give him a shout out and give that team a shout out for the wonderful work that they've done. So let me give you a little bit of vision. We believe that with urban leagues, school districts, school boards, community, faith-based organization, community leaders, that we can begin to stand up a model that says enough is enough in our communities, and we are going to come together to find solutions to help change the game for our young people. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy, you know that at the bottom of the pyramid, there is basic needs being met, right? Survival. And for those of us that work in some of these school districts, we know many of our students are dealing at a survival level. We have record numbers of children who are playing parental roles at home. We have record numbers of children who are coming to school hungry, going home hungry, in spite of the programs that we have to give them food and what have you, but there's still issues. What we know is that the top of Maslow's hierarchy is something called self-actualization. And that's the place where we begin to understand things like the Pythagorean theory. We understand calculus, we understand AP history, and the like. So for children that are at the bottom of the pyramid and can't get past survival, how do we expect them to reach a point where they can really be self-actualized in an academic environment? So I believe that what our responsibility is as the village is that we, in fact, have to begin to put out a call, put out an agenda, put out a movement that creates a big tent to gather all comers and all equity ambassadors to help in this movement. You're our first wave, so I'm deputizing you today to be our first wave of equity ambassadors. Do I have anybody in the room that's up for that today? Here? Okay, very good, very good. So at this point, and Frank, help me, we're going to go to the PowerPoint. Okay, so my challenge, I can see it from here, very good. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to share with you is there are about 88 Urban League affiliates across the state of Ohio, and we have 5 of us represented here today. In the state of Ohio, we have more affiliates in the state of Ohio than any other state. So we have a good team of Urban League affiliates here. We're connected to the mission of the National Urban League in that there is an I Am Empowered agenda. There are multiple goals for various strategies of the National Urban League implementation. The one we're going to sink in on today is the goal that's around education. So the I Am Empowered goal around education says that by 2025, every American child is ready, that's a key word, ready for college, work, and life. So we're locking down that conversation about, are they going to college? Are they going to work? That's not our conversation. Our job is to make sure they're ready, whichever one they want to do. Okay, so that's going to be our conversation, and that's going to be our movement, okay? And so everything you hear is going to be kind of aligned with that. Now, you're going to also hear us talk about equity and excellence in education. I'm going to say that again. Equity and excellence. We're not going to have a whole lot of debate about whether it is public education or private education or charter schools. What I say is, wherever a child that the Urban League represents sits, I want them to have a quality education. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So in the Equity and Excellence Program, which is a national program that comes from the National Urban League, there are actually 7 areas of focus. What you see on this list, though, are starred items which represent the areas that the Northeast Ohio program is going to focus on, okay, as a beginning point. Eventually we'll get to others, but as a beginning point, these are the ones that we're going to get to. And let me just take a minute. I think I should back up to understand, to explain, because I didn't do this in the beginning. There's going to be 2 parts to today's meeting. One is this overall broad presentation, and then there's going to be a dig in where our affiliate CEO groups and people that they've helped to convene today, after this big presentation, we're going to go to work to decide, now what are we going to do next? And how are we going to organize ourselves to really create this momentum that we need to create this movement? So that's really how we're organized to get our work done today. And for all of those that want to stay with us for the second part, you're more than welcome. I know some of you have been asked to be a part of that, but anybody else that wants to stay and can, you're welcome to be a part of that, because we need your brain power and we need your input. So let me stop for a minute. Are there any questions about these 7 focus areas and the ones that are starred? Okay, seeing none, we'll keep it moving. We talked about ESSA, yes. Now, the No Ceilings on Success, can we go back to that one, Frank? The one before that, okay, is a national campaign that has been launched by the National Urban League so that we have common language and common materials that can address the kind of movement and the kind of campaign that we're trying to do. This campaign is about achieving educational equity under the ESSA banner. And we have many partners. Now, there is a No Ceilings on Success website that has lots of information. And I think what we can do, Gabby, okay. Gabrielle is our intern from Cleveland State on the Urban League team. I think what we want to do is work with Ms. Sharon when we get back, and we put this up on our website so that you all can go to the website and download it so that you can have access to get to this, okay? Does that work for everybody? Okay, very good. Okay. Yes, yes, we can do that too, yes. Okay, so you see what we've done today is we've done our first wave in this soft launch of bringing together state and local stakeholders. So we have superintendents here, we have state legislators here, we have parents and families. We don't have students here today because we couldn't work that out quickly enough. But we have community-based organization leaders and higher education folks. So we have a beginning real good cross-section of folks to help us think about this and help us organize this. And I will say that in the work that Frank and I have done, and Stanley has also been a part of that, and Sharon Brown from our Wallace team, and Tom Conley, we already are working with Warrensville School District, Maple Heights School District, really deep with Cleveland, Metropolitan School District. And we have our newest superintendent here from Euclid who joined us today. So we're glad to have him. And those are all in my catchment area in Cuyahoga County, so I'm really proud. And of course, we have, Frank's been working with the folks in Lorraine, and Tom's been working with the folks in Warren and Youngstown. So, and you'll hear from others that our other affiliate CEOs are doing in their areas as well. So one of the things that we hope to bring in for our foundation partners that are here today, so you kind of know what we're up to too, we're looking at bringing three major things into this arena. Our thought leadership. As Urban League leaders, we want to be viewed as those that bring thought leadership to the table on both state and district level education work. We want to engage people by doing stakeholder meetings, parent engagement and trainings. I did a training actually on Monday, and I did an engagement event over at Case Western Reserve. So one of my students who was in the social work event that I did yesterday on the life of, I was so honored to do a session on the life of Congressman Louis Stokes, and to honor him and to kind of talk about his legacy. And we engaged in a discussion about where we are today versus where we are when he talked about right after the election of President Barack Obama, where the country was in having its first African-American president. And we said some of the things he said, he talked about how far the country had moved and how we had a big discussion about that's not where we are right now. So one of the students was excited, and she joined us today, so we're really glad to have you. So then finally, advocacy and communications. You see at your table, you have the little black book that we gave you. That's part of the No Ceilings on Success media toolkit that comes from the National Urban League. They do a great job in providing us materials and so forth. And for those of you that, I'll give you a little incentive, a little teaser here. For those of you that decide to stay for session 2, you see this nice little pin here that says No Ceilings on Success. We have one of those for each of you that stay for session 2. So we're excited about those opportunities. Okay, so thank you. And let me just stop and see if there's any questions before any comments, questions, response? Talk to me.
Yep.
Yes, Murrah.
I was quickly looking at your first slide where it had the areas you're going to be focusing on.
Yes.
It was the very first one you put up.
Okay, we'll get back to it for you. The EAP areas of focus, yes. Mm-hmm.
And one that I don't see, I mentioned to you before that I brought copies of the state's
Yes.
strategic plan.
Right, we're going to do that in session 2. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one thing, the committee that I was on was the Student Support Committee.
Yes.
And I'm just looking, and I don't see anything that really focuses on providing the kinds of supports for students that they need, and possibly can come through other areas, but I was trying to see if there was an area where that would,
Check.
So thank you, Merle, for that. I think we're
check,
going to be
check.
addressing that under equity and excellence at scale.
All right,
What
check,
is it going to
check,
take to
check,
get
check,
equity and excellence at scale? That's one of the pillars that we need to build. But that's the very thing that when we deal in session 2, we need you all to help us start thinking through. How do we really build that model for what we need? It's good. Thank you. Anyone else?
Others, because I think that was really important, because when we get these, the guidance from National Urban League, we're always trying to figure out how do we localize this? How does it make sense on a local level? So that was really good feedback. So other questions, thoughts, comments before we break into these table conversations? All right, well, we're going to start some table dialogue here. So on your table, you should have a list of questions, prompting questions. We're going to spend, and I asked y'all to stay here till 1:30. Is that still okay? Okay, so then we can put the time in. We're going to spend about a half hour until 1 o'clock discussing these questions and any other questions you may want to ask, but I'll just walk through the format of this. So you'll first go around the table, you'll introduce yourself and what equity means to you. share a story, a equity story. So we heard Marsha's story earlier of equity, where it happened to just pan out that way, where it was she got the equal treatment, but it wasn't equitable treatment. So share one of your stories about of where you're aware of that. And then, have you ever had access? What has it been like when you've had access to all the resources you've needed? How have you and the people you love been impacted by the education system? So really, let's have some conversation about the system as a whole. Why is civil rights legislation like every Student Success Act important? So why is this act important to you? And then we'll talk about some next steps. And when that last, make sure you get to this number 7, because we really want to make sure we talk about action out of this. How do we mobilize out of this conversation to some action? So really, the purpose of this, and I may have to mix y'all up, because I noticed y'all sat with people y'all came with, which I asked you not to do. So yeah, I'm going to ask you all to please stand up. Y'all got new people. Look at y'all. Y'all trying to hold it down. No, don't mess our table up. All right, let's see. If you two could join these two over here. Oh, you coming up here? Okay. And you two right here, if you could join, Superintendent, if y'all two could, you come into this one. Oh, good. You come in here. All right. I'm going to let y'all self-police then. I don't have to do all that. All right. So go ahead, y'all. Start the table dialogue. I'll come around and make sure, and just, we'll report out at 1 o'clock. So I can just take it back there to the YouTube channel. Trying to create a vibe for y'all. You shutting that down to y'all's not good recipients of this facilitation. Y'all wouldn't move. Y'all don't like my music. It's too loud. It's still too loud. So hopefully by now you're having some conversation about equity, and in about 5 minutes I want you to shift to the action question. But continue to have your equity conversation, but eventually, just in the next 5-10 minutes, shift to that action question. What can we do as community members, as whatever you represent? What could we do to make an impact? look at this work, or did you hear something new? So if we could just go around each table and kind of report out on the equity conversation, just that portion of the conversation when you talked about equity, any key takeaways that stood out from something someone said. So you can volunteer your table. We got one right here. Thank you. And I'm going to try to take notes.
So I'm Teresa Persis, but I'm really going to talk about Myra's point because it was really important. She reminded us that he gets what they need, but her vision of equity was about equitable access and.
Right, because I was telling them when I was in school and I switched from Bedford School Systems to Cleveland in the middle of ninth grade, my biology class at Bedford was 2 classes. It was my class period, and then there was a lab. Well, when I got to Cleveland Public Schools, there was 1 class. It was just class. And the only thing we did that was lab-wise was we looked at these slides that were in this case from 50 years ago and identified what we thought they were. And I just was amazed at that, because even when I got back to Bedford in the 10th grade, they almost didn't even want to give me credit for that biology class.
So one of the things that I hope we noted accurately early in the presentation, we all, in the national movement, we always couple excellence with equity. Because to your point, equity, you could lower the bar. You know, a lot of times people talk about the gap closing. It's like one of the things that I recommend, especially for new superintendents, we did an equity audit at Lorain City Schools where we hired someone to come in and look at the distribution of everything within the school. And so one of the things that came up was suspensions, and we looked at the rate of suspension, and of course, you know, black and brown boys actually black boys were being suspended at higher levels than everyone, including Hispanics. And so the solution isn't, oh, let's go suspend more white boys so it catches up, you know, that to close the gap. No, it's you know, how do we lower the suspension rate for African-American boys? So sometimes in this equity conversation, it can get so focused on gap closing that you forget the excellence. So we do want to make sure we're also looking at advanced placement. We're looking at dual enrollment, these other aspects when we're looking at equity and not just gap closing. So really great point. You got one more at the table?
So one of the other points that we had at the conversation was the presenter talked about, our beginning presenter from Cleveland, the Cleveland Urban League, talked about the Maslow's needs. And what we were just getting into the discussion here is that for urban districts, and I happen to run an urban district, Canton, we spend a disproportional amount of time and energy and effort and money trying to satisfy those disproportionate needs before we even get to algebra and geometry and all of that kind of stuff. And the reason why that matters is because while I certainly would the ideal goal is to have the situation where every kid is experiencing what was experienced in Bedford versus how she experienced it in Cleveland. But before you get there, you have non-academic and academic barriers that the school has inherited that it has to address before you get to that point. And until so this might be my last comment of the day. So while I got the mic, I just want to say one more thing.
Keep going, bro.
And that is this, so I am appreciative of the fact that this conversation is not about, and I don't hear any tenor of what the schools are doing wrong. But instead, it is how do we partner with schools to help them address the needs that need to be addressed? Now, I said at this table, I'll say it to you, that as a superintendent, we gotta do better. Our teachers gotta do better. The superintendent has to do better. The principal has to do better. So there is definitely in that pie a significant amount of room for improvement for the school system. So I don't want that to be not heard. At the same time, when we are able to be an education system and not a social service agency, is when I think we will ultimately realize what it is that we are trying to discuss today.
And can you introduce yourself? What's your name?
My name is Adrian Allison. I'm the superintendent of Canton City.
Awesome. Thank you for your comments. We got some over here now. And while she's taking the mic over there, you know, when we talk about equity and we talk about a state or Department of Ed education strategic plan, you know, Ohio has still yet to grapple with the inequitable distribution of resources. You know, schools are still being funded at rates where you're not getting the resources you need to address the needs of the students. You're getting the same equal resources as a school that has, you know, I'm not going to go there, but go ahead. Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm Carla Chapman with the Akron Public Schools. I'm the Director of Community Relations, and I lead our district's diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I wanted to share that The Ohio State University, one of my alma maters, just released some of its latest research done by Roger Goddard, which states that why relationships, not money, are the key to improving schools. And so this study of more than 5,000 students across the state of Michigan found that social capital, social emotional learning, addressing that relationship between teacher and student and content, being trauma responsive, I like responsive versus informed, is 3 to 5 times more impactful on academic achievement than the traditional way we fund schools today. So to the point about the resource allocation, I would hands down go to court that most of our teachers and our systems understand what kids need to know academically, what they don't know academically, differentiated instruction, PLCs, you know, we got the alphabet soup. We got teaching and learning down, but we don't have the other side of the coin yet. We are not competent in being trauma responsive. We are not competent in intercultural competence, the ability to navigate across cultural differences. And we do shy away from the conversations around equity as it relates to disparities in education because it is uncomfortable. And until we're ready to address our hiring practices, our licensure, our accountability and the way we rate performance, not just on student success, but how you know, inspire, and motivate your students, right? And the school climate piece, the safety piece, which my colleagues here at the table are gonna speak more about. I mean, I can get on a soapbox on this stuff.
That's good, that's good,
but,
I'm with you, I'm with you.
It's just important to know that we have research now that says relationships.
Yeah, and to your point that you made about when we're ready, I don't think we have a choice to wait for people to get ready. We have to make that decision now that now is the time. We ain't gonna wait for them to say, hey, I'm ready for you to come help me. We know, as Marsha pointed out earlier, there's a crisis already at hand, so we have to make these systems ready.
We have a three-way conversation going on over here. Where we have everybody involved. So I'm just going to cut to the chase right quickly. That was the praise team that started. I'm delivering the word, Pastor Stanley. And then we're going to close.
As long as you don't collect the offering.
We're going to close with a benediction. And somewhere along in here, somebody got to take up an offering somewhere. Because I'm on fixed income. I'm a volunteer, okay? And I'm the only one in here that ain't being paid. Y'all know that, don't you? Okay? Let me tell you this very, very, very briefly. Meryl knows me very well. We worked for the last 1,000 years, Stanley, and so does Marshall Markovic. So what I'm going to tell you is absolutely true. I worked for the Congresswoman, Marsha Fudge, okay, for 4.5 years. In 2015, she said, I need to start talking to young people to find out what they're really thinking about. We put 360 11th graders and 12th graders in an auditorium at Nottingham Library, off of Lakeshore. Beautiful setting. They came from like 7 different school districts. We put out the news media because the news media thought that something was going to be crazy. And we put them out. We put all adults out, with the exception of her staff. She walks up to 360 young people and she asked one question, and I shared it with them. Who do you trust? And the answer came back, nobody. Got very quiet when they said that. She asked again, nobody. You don't trust police? No. Why not? Somebody pop up here. You don't trust this, and this? No. You don't trust walking to school? No. Who do you trust in the school? Nobody. I got a favorite teacher, but I can't trust everybody. And I stood there and realized that our children absolutely understand they got nobody that they can depend on to be safe. Ever since 2015, I've seen nothing change other than school shootings. A young man stood up and he pulled his shirt back, and I shared it with him. He had 3 bullets. Never hit the news media, never hit anything else. On the way to school one day. Our children that I work with don't believe that we can protect them. So I don't know where that fits in the first 6. But if you honestly believe every day that you don't have anybody protecting you, and I shared with them, a young lady, 14, 15 years old, walked up to the microphone, strong as she could be. She said, I don't trust people in my family. I was raped. And it got 360 young people got quiet. She told her story, and those young people applauded her that she had that kind of strength. They know what's going on. We better figure out what's going on.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
And let me finish one thing. And the reason I'm saying that is because I'm introducing the benediction.
I'm going to try to put a bow around all of this.
Yeah, no, it's good. This is all good.
One of the things that I think, again, I don't know where it fits, but I know it's up here someplace, that all of us are talking about, is that equity has to be inclusive of addressing social and emotional needs of our kids. And I don't know what that looks like or where it fits. But we're going through a lot of trauma-informed training. And the trainer shared a poem with us that I want to share, if I can pull it up on my screen here, that really speaks to where our kids are. It was written by Joshua Dickerson, who wrote this after he witnessed an interaction between a child and a teacher. And it goes like this. I woke myself up because we ain't got an alarm clock. Dug in the dirty clothes basket because ain't nobody washed my uniform. Brushed my hair and teeth in the dark because the lights ain't on. Even got my baby sister ready because my mama wasn't home. Got us both to school on time to eat us a good breakfast. Then when I got to class, the teacher fussed because I ain't got a pencil. That's what our kids deal with, and that's what our teachers deal with. And so if we talk about equity, we've got to figure out how are we inclusive of addressing those issues that the kids deal with before they get to school. Because if we create safe environments and we demonstrate that we can develop relationships with our kids, they will be open to learning.
That is awesome. You know, one of the, related to that, I think one of Marsha's points she was making earlier about we've made the mistake of assuming education is something that's done over there. This the school's job, as you mentioned earlier. It's the school's job. Communities aren't built around schools. Schools are built inside of communities. So we have to remember that these are our schools. These are our children. These traumatic issues, it's not the schools. It's all of our issue that we have to deal with, because if they ain't going to school, they're going to be out in the community doing other things. And as we look at solutions, that's why we were excited to have such a diverse group. And we think part of the Urban League's mission in this movement is to create what they call these stakeholder circles, groups like this that are cross-departmental, cross-functional, cross-industry, so that we can start to see what is your role as a foundation, what's your role as a school, what's your role, and hold each other accountable and support each other. Because and I love Norton, because Norton is the best in the world. Norton Corporation, the sponsor of Lorraine County Urban League. No, I'm joking. No, that was a commercial. They're one of our sponsors for the Urban League, so I was giving a little fake commercial, half joking. But I used to work in a foundation, and sometimes they don't fund what's really needed to happen. So when we see that, hey, what's needed is social, emotional support for these young people, and sometimes their focus is on something that's totally not related, and then they wonder why they're not getting the results they want. They say, oh, we want to get kids coding. It's like, well, if the kid walking through crack deals all day on his way to school, worried about getting shot, now you want them to, let's address those issues as well, not to take away one, but, and that's where we got to see everybody's role. Dan?
One of the benefits of working in a place like this is that I see a lot of different conversations happening in a lot of different sectors: healthcare, education, urban policy, economic development, workforce development. And listening to the sort of nest of comments, the suite of comments over there, and thinking about this broader definition of what we're responsible for when it comes to this conversation about equity, makes me reflect on the lead poisoning tragedy that we have collectively as a community ignored for 40, 50, 60 years. I don't really know. And I often wonder, and I keep asking this question as often as I can, as often as it's appropriate, if we took the money that we are sinking into blockland or pick any other kind of economic development imperative that we're currently considering as a community, and instead tried to create safe homes for all of our children, regardless of where they live, whether it's in Glenville or Garfield Heights or wherever, what kind of return would we find on that investment 20, 30 years down the road? And would that be, in fact, even greater than the return we believe we might get by expanding the queue by getting into Bitcoin, or expanding the queue by 40 feet towards Huron Avenue?
Yeah.
I'll just leave it there.
No, so Dan, to your point, and other comments, I want to make sure other tables get a chance to talk, is about the short game versus the long game. So the average tenure of an urban superintendent is 3 years. So we know it takes more than 3 years to turn a school system around and get any sort of serious reform and culture change. It takes a lot longer than 3 years. But if we haven't stepped up as a community and said this is our agenda long term, what we have is a superintendent pops in, I'm dropping all the old stuff, here's the new thing, and then we have to start all over every time. And we see that with this House Bill 70. I ain't gonna get too much into that, but we see that with these keep restarts. And in the short game that's being played, what's hot for the moment, and that's really a detriment right now as well.
One of the things that we talked about, that I mentioned at the table, was the importance of getting, in Ohio, 4% of teachers are teachers of color. 4%. Okay, so. I think that's really important, and we need to digest that. We need to talk about, if we're talking about equity, we need to take a look at, number one, making the teaching profession one where folks want to teach, and secondly, getting our young children of color interested in teaching early on. And you do that by, first of all, improving teaching, working conditions, salary, and so forth, and then, because that's really, a lot of people say you have to have a black teacher. No, you don't, but it really helps. It really, and I'm saying that from 40 years of teaching experience. But I just think that that's really important. And I just want to comment on the social emotional. I know I already mentioned the ODE and State Board of Education strategic plan, but one of the things that I'm proud of in here is that we have 4 learning domains, and they are equal. Foundational knowledge and skills, the arts, social emotional learning, and technical thinking, critical thinking. So, we don't have social and emotional as an afterthought, or art and music as an afterthought, but we have 4 equal learning domains. And I'm just really, really proud of that, because I think with that we can move in the right direction.
So here again is the opportunity and power we have in this room and through our network. So The state just went through an amazing strategic plan process, very engaging. Well, what's about to happen next Tuesday? A new governor is going to come in, and that new governor may say, "Oh, nope, scrap all that. We're going to do this all again under my." So unless we say, oh, "Hey, we I've already had conversations with some of the folks running to say, "Hey, we really enjoyed working with Paulo. We feel like we got good momentum. I don't know what his politics are, but to let you know from my standpoint, we're getting some stuff done." But how can we collectively raise our voice to say, hey, we believe in this plan. We put work into this. We don't want you to start all over when you come back in, as opposed to, next Tuesday, it could be a lot different conversation about all the work, again, starting over. And we have to stop letting people do that to us. We have to stop letting people start over with us all the time because we lose all the momentum we've had. You had to come here.
An additional response to that teacher representation, and it's probably not a popular response. I also, and going further than just teachers of color, I think it's important for our teachers to live in the area in which they are teaching. I was so hurt when Cleveland got rid of their police and fire and city. I think any municipality that is as large as Cleveland and Akron and other districts, their employees should live inside the limits of their city. And I say it for this reason. On the department, I was a police officer for 15 years with the RTA Transit Police Department. When you have white men coming in from Ashtabula, rural farms and everything else coming in, policing our children of color, they don't understand them. They don't understand their body language. They don't understand their way of talking. They don't understand the culture that they've been raised in. They see everything as a threat. They see everything as disrespect. And it's the same for our teachers. What better way can we educate and fulfill the needs of these children if my teacher lives next door to me and I see Miss Mayberry other than just when she's disciplining me in school, but I'm going to her house for cocoa and whatever the night for Halloween. You know what I'm saying? There's a difference that happens when we truly do community together 24/7 rather than just 6 hours of a day, and then we go back to our comfortable living and talk about how we did good for those poor little children in wherever.
No, so I agree with that. The only piece I'll say is that there was a comment made. I was in New Orleans yesterday for some education work through the National Urban League, and one of the comments we walked away with was, use what you have, start where you are, and do what you can. And so some of these issues are hard for us to tackle, whether it's lead poisoning, infant mortality, some of these big, monstrous issues is hard for us to tackle, getting folks to move into a city. But while they're there, we can train them. We can train them. This is how you respond to this. This is what this is. In Ohio State, the Kirwan Institute does great work around implicit bias and helping, professionals better understand their own biases and identifying those and how do you address those and counter those. So we got to work with who's there. And I don't think we should excuse them because they're from Ashtabula. You in Cleveland now, you need to learn how Cleveland works,
Okay.
You had another?
Can I?
Yeah.
Okay, so
introduce yourself too, please.
I'm Dr. Marvin Jones. I'm the superintendent for Euclid City Schools. And much of what everyone has shared, we talked about, from relationships lacking in our schools to the people that stand in front of our children and teach. 2 to 3 years ago, 90% of the teachers that graduated in the state of Ohio were European females, European American females. So that's an issue. And the state's decision to end residency requirements was so detrimental, especially to our urbans. And so I believe the big issue is asset versus deficit-based thinking. Asset versus deficit-based thinking. We have teachers that stand before our classrooms that look at our African-American children through deficit-based lenses. This kid has energy. There must be something wrong with him. Right. The kid isn't bored, but there's something wrong. It's not something wrong with me. It's something wrong with the kid.
Yeah.
Right? And so we have a lot of teachers that develop these two beliefs. This kid can't learn, or this kid doesn't want to learn. And that gives rise to behaviors, an amalgamation of behaviors throughout the building. And before you know it, you have a toxic culture where the practices, the strategies and everything that are deployed in a building are all about control. Because these kids will get off the hook if we don't control them. So until we start to fix the asset versus deficit-based thinking, there will continue to be inequities in our schools, in our districts, in our communities. In the city of Euclid, we have almost 90% of our students that are minority. Almost 90%. 11% of our teachers are minority. But listen to this statistic. In the city, 55% of the community is European American. 55%. 50%. It doesn't match the district demographic. We have almost 8,000 students that live in the city of Euclid. 8,000 students. But we only educate 5,200 of them. The families north of the boulevard send their kids to parochials. And so not only do we have inequities within a district, I mean, schools are open systems. They're open systems, they're porous. What's in the community comes into the building. And unfortunately, all we have coming into our building are the kids that struggle. But who's teaching them? People with deficit-based lenses.
So we got Tim. I thank you for that, because that's a good segue to when I was getting ready, preparing these notes. There's two things, I thought about, and we're not going to do this whole exercise, and I'll tell you why. So a part of one of the challenges that we have when we address urban education, which we just did such a great job at, was our deficits. When we look at urban education, and right now I'm getting my MBA, so we're doing a lot around SWOT and stuff like that, but we can fill this bucket up so quick. Weaknesses and threats, we'll fill that joint up. Give us 5 pages. We'll go through the weaknesses and threats. But one of the things we're learning, just through my work, I've learned just through experience, is that when you focus on your strengths, that's where things get done. You operate and play on your strengths. And so many times we don't look at the strengths of urban education and what's going on in our schools. So I'd like for us, for the last 10 minutes, before we shift to the action, we're just going to scrap weaknesses and threats. And let's talk to what are the strengths we see in urban ed and the opportunities that we see exist right now in urban education.
So from a student standpoint, like in our community, we have a lot of European American community members who go to the library, and they complain about the students' language. They complain about the students' behavior. The students fight behind the police station, And so rather than looking at these students through deficit-based lenses, like there's something wrong with them,
isn't it great?
What's a plus? What's a plus? What's a plus, right? Yeah. And these kids are fearless.
Yeah.
They're fearless. Can we capitalize on that? Can we channel that fearlessness? Like Marvin Jones. I was a kid that was fighting all the time in elementary, right? But I had people who took an interest in me and helped channel that.
Yep.
I ended up playing 9 instruments and going to school on a football scholarship.
Wow.
But it was because I had enough people who viewed me not through deficit-based lenses, but through asset-based lenses.
For sure.
So
that's
fearlessness,
great.
Fighter
Others,
spirit,
that's great. Now, this is going to be challenging for us because as America, we've been taught to find only deficits with this population. So, the fight, that we got fight in us. So if it's House Bill 70, we need to fight. Hey, kids, we need y'all to... No, don't fight. I fight. I'm a grown man. I fight. I have not used my fist. I don't think I've maybe been in 2 fist fights in my life, but I'm a fighter. So when we need kids like that to say, hey, your schools are under attack. These folks in these offices is trying to strip away. We need to fight, so we can put grit to make it a little more comfortable. Okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Because that energy is there. That they know something's wrong. It's a fight. I think we got. I'll put slash. See, y'all so PC. Y'all didn't got so. Y'all didn't let these folks. What other word? Because fight is really the word I mean. When we fight, we need to fight. The civil rights movement was a fight. Amen.
Amen.
Can I get an offering for that too?
Amen.
Where my reverend at? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What's happening right now is actually interesting. Psychology is is part of my educational background, but the strength I was going to put up was resilience.
Resilience. All right.
Resilience. But what's interesting, let's look what's happening in this room, and we talk about what's happening. You have be very real and it's very respectful. We have a generation gap happening right now. He says fight. You're like, no, grit. No, it is fight. It is fight. This generation has a different understanding. Their meanings for words are different. So for them, it is an absolute fight. Grit to them is like, okay, go get a Quaker bag and put some water in it, stir it, and put it in the microwave. That's grit for them. And I mean, no disrespect, but for them, and so, but I respect the fact that we have wisdom that is going to help move that understanding so that we can have multiple definitions for words, because that will then also help to bridge that gap is when you have the ability to be multilingual. And that is one of our strengths, because our elders, and I am in that group, you know, I had to learn how to speak a different language for my young people to understand what I was trying to transmit. No, not trying, what I was transmitting to them. So I knew the word was this, but they didn't understand it as,
Yeah,
as
no,
so
I
that was
appreciate
that.
that. I appreciate it. Yep.
We talked about fight behind the library.
And then I flipped it into I fight. Yeah, for sure.
Not a gap, darling. It's just understanding what he was
Yeah, and I'm infamous, but I'm infamous for capturing a thought and not explaining the pathway. I just show up. They're like, "How we get here, Frank?" It's like, "We here." You know, just they're like, "No, Frank. How do we get from here to?" So, no, yeah, I just take you with me. I'm sorry. I could do a better job of saying this is how we got from here to here. I just be saying, "Come." No, thank you.
I find that they're very creative and entrepreneurial. I see more young people who are trying to figure out ways to work for themselves because they don't want to work for nobody else than ever.
Yep. Yeah, it shocks me we don't have more entrepreneurship programs in urban schools because, you know, everything I did was hustle in high school.
And we're talking about the stress of urban education.
Yep.
I just got to say, we have a whole bunch of teachers who care.
Yep. I was hoping somebody's going to say it.
No matter what happens, you know, no matter what happens, they come back the next
Yep.
day ready to get in there
Yep.
and love their kids
Yep.
and do what they need.
Yep.
So they're agile.
Yep. Yep. Keep spitting them out. Strengths, yeah. We only doing strengths. Yep. Yep, you can just keep spinning them out. I'm going to just keep writing now. Y'all in the flow now. Don't let me float stop y'all.
Yeah, the kids themselves.
Yep.
And so to speak to the children themselves, they are passionate about what they believe, and in that passion comes their intrinsic strength and their transparency. They're very honest in how they feel, and they're unapologetically authentic, and they don't care.
Yep. Innovation. Yep.
Are we on opportunities yet?
Let's shift. All right. So with these strengths, what opportunities exist with these strengths? So I mentioned one earlier, which I didn't explain how I got there, but around bad policies and how can we mobilize young people to go testify in Columbus when there's bad policies that are impacting their education.
If I can just say,
Yes,
maybe
Gabby.
this is like a twist on opportunities, but I feel like just in the moment that we just had, teachers have the opportunity to make a lot of situations teachable moments. And I think that is a huge opportunity as opposed to criminalizing or, you know, kicking kids out of the classroom. A lot of those situations can be turned into teachable moments.
Yep.
They spend 8 hours of, you know, their day in the classroom. You know, teachers are a huge part of kids' lives.
Yep.
So.
That's good stuff. You were in my after-school programs. SOC.
Extracurricular activities have been removed. Does that need to be brought back?
Oh, yeah?
Okay.
She was lying. I was the worst little mentor, too. I played with the kids the whole time. No, I was trying to be helpful. We got one there. One
Okay,
there.
what I wanted to say, what has been removed from the classroom, I hear more and more, is extracurricular activities need to be brought back into this. We can do that ourselves individually.
Yep. Then we got Reverend Miller. You got a preacher's voice. You're a preacher, Reverend Miller.
I just want to say, you have partners over on the left-hand side, but that also creates an opportunity on the right. We got a whole corporate community that is not being held accountable, engage themselves in the schools where they operate, and we need to go after them to get them involved.
Yep. We keep hearing this whining about lack of workforce, and there's opportunity right there. Yep.
Just a suggestion to expand that after school to out of school time.
Mm-hmm.
Because
so you're thinking summer as well,
could
and
be
spring
summer, could be
breaks
before school. Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Vacation
good point.
times
Out
like
of school.
Thanksgiving, Christmas, and all of that. So
yep.
just out of school time.
Yep. I appreciate that. Mr. Johnson. Yep, I agree with that. And I've always seen that as a way to engage the corporate community. This whole idea of companies adopting schools. I don't know what schools are in, or companies in Euclid and Canton, but I've always felt like these these companies need to be called to the carpet. Hey, you want a future workforce? Why don't you adopt my science program? Donate X amount, send me volunteers that'll help teach. We got to start to call them out and get them engaged.
I think the churches, too, need to get back involved.
The churches, yeah, faith.
Very much so.
All right. Y'all over there, Akron, I'm sorry. Y'all got anything over there? I know y'all over. I'm sorry. I'm going to move this. I can move it over there. Oh, y'all preached already. Y'all had y'all sermon already. Y'all did y'all thing. Y'all service is adjourned. Oh, perfect. All right, so it's 1:30. I want to be respectful of time. So what we're going to do from this point, we're going to take some of these things that were suggested, and then our debrief, we're going to really drill down into what we can do to make an impact. And it's from an Urban League standpoint. Now, we encourage you to go back to your respective communities and find how you can be an ambassador for equity, whether you're a superintendent who now is curious about doing an equity audit for your district, whether you're a volunteer, whether you're a student who is really ready to engage and be involved in after-school programs, for you to individually find how you want to engage. And then we're going to spend some time figuring out how the Urban League can be most effective. What is our strength, and how can we leverage one of these opportunities to be able to make a difference in equity? So thank you all for coming today. I hope it was worth your time. Marcia?
Can I just say, and those partners that the Urban League asked to come to this, I want my partners to stay as a part of the conversation to help inform, our plan.
Awesome. Well, yeah, anybody's welcome to stay. And I thank you all for coming, too, because this is time out of your day. It's Halloween. They did have some good Thanksgiving. The food was good. It tastes like a little, warm up for Thanksgiving. But thank y'all. Have a blessed day. Thank you. Please make sure you sign in, too. We had sign-in sheets at every table, so we got your contact info. I'm in her strategic plan class, and there's a lot of social work students in it. She's awesome.
Yeah, I haven't had her yet.
I recommend checking it if you can fit it her in your schedule. She is amazing.
This is actually my first semester here in graduate school. So yeah.